Initially, Nora had thought that even though it was obvious that Ruth was making things difficult for her, the woman was definitely working within the special department's regulations. It was only natural that after interrogating the suspects and finding out that the mysterious organization's ultimate mastermind was Yvette Anderson, Nora's mother, Ruth would stop at nothing to interrogate Nora. But Nora was not just anybody. She was an important, integral member of the special department, so if they intended on interrogating her, they would have to follow proper protocol, which meant that they would need to get permission from Morris before they could proceed, especially because she was one of Morris's top recruits. So when Ruth detained her and wouldn't allow her to leave, Nora understood her way of thinking. She was attempting to eliminate any possibilities of Nora escaping. She wanted to know the involvement that Nora might have with the mysterious organization. And, because Nora understood Ruth's challenges from the beginning, she fully intended to cooperate with them to the best of her ability. Her confidence came from the fact that she knew that once Morris returned from his assignment, wherever that was, the truth would come to light. This was why she had told Brenda to leave a few minutes before. So it made no sense to Nora that Ruth would stoop to installing that blinding light in Brenda's office. There was something sinister about the entire process, because even in a normal interrogation, they should not be employing torture methods. And these circumstances were even more questionable, because there was no actual evidence Nora was even involved with the mysterious organization. Nora closed her eyes, but it was pointless. The bright beams pierced through her eyelids, making it impossible for her to get her desperately needed sleep. She was now experiencing for herself the pain and agony of a person under interrogation by her own department. After 10 minutes, she gave up trying to get rest and did the opposite. She took action. She picked up her cell phone, tapped and swiped away on it, finagling a signal from this room whose Wi-Fi had been jammed 15 minutes before. The SWAT members studied Nora warily, as they knew she must be up to something. Having trained with her, they all knew that for a slender woman with a delicate frame, she was a force to be reckoned with, so none of them wanted to take her on in a physical confrontation. Sensing the team's uneasiness in dealing with Nora, Ruth rolled her eyes and marched back into the office, challenging Nora herself. She demanded, "What are you planning? Do you actually think you could escape? That, to me, is a sign of a guilty conscience, don't you think?" Nora flexed her wrist a little. "No, I hate wasting time. Let's get this over with quickly." Ruth was taken aback. "What do you mean, get this over with quickly?" Ruth stood there with her hands on her hips. Once she took that stance, Nora seized her opportunity to make her move on the vulnerable stance. She proceeded to quietly hook her foot around the back leg of the chair sitting next to the sofa. With all the force she could muster, she shoved the chair, and it flew directly toward Ruth, who screamed, but couldn't duck quickly enough, so the chair flew past her, grazing her head. The chair crashed onto the floor. Ruth cried out and grabbed her forehead, which was buzzing from the impact. Furious as she clutched her head, she barked, "Nora, what are you doing? Are you trying to break out of here?" Waving her free arm, she glared at the SWAT officers behind and shouted, "What are you people standing around waiting for? She's attacking me, us. Get her, knock her down, arrest her." Aggressively, 2 of the SWAT officers took a step toward Nora. But, as they did, Nora whipped out her cell phone to reveal Morris's face displayed on her screen. Because of her treatment and the lack of sleep, Nora was extremely grumpy at the moment. All she wanted to do was end this madness so that she could go home and go to sleep. "I'm sorry, fellas, but seriously, this is enough. Go ahead, Captain Ford, tell them what you have to say." When she saw Morris on the screen, Ruth knew that it was all over. Nora slipped out of trouble time and time again. She was as oily as an eel. She knew for a fact that there was no cell phone signal in the area where Morris was located. That was the only reason that she had instigated this attack against Nora, because she had received confirmation that Morris was unreachable by phone. So how did this woman manage to get through to him on a video call? Ruth grumbled to herself. The woman obviously could have taken out her cell phone right away and reached Morris, but chose to resort to violence instead. So like Nora. If only everyone could see it the way Ruth did. On the screen, the corners of Morris's mouth were turned down. In a low, gravelly voice, Morris growled, "Nora is someone that I personally recruited to be a part of this team. Do any of you have the audacity to think that I would have brought her into this organization willy-nilly without properly vetting her? Go on, I'm waiting. Speak now or hold your peace." Morris paused to wait for any objections, and when they were not forthcoming, he continued. "Let me make myself perfectly clear. I will vouch for the fact that she has absolutely nothing to do with the mysterious organization. In addition, I have been constantly kept in the loop about her communication with Truman Yale. I'll also remind you that we have 4 suspects in our custody. And how do you think we were even able to arrest those bodyguards? It was also because of Nora's contact with Yale. Through her exchanges with him, we were able to pinpoint his place of residence, and therefore we were able to make our move. Apparently, you have all forgotten that fact." For emphasis, he added, "Ruth." With his exact and laser-like delivery, it was clear to the colleagues present that there was no validation to interrogate Nora at all. On a personal level, most of the members of the special department didn't have any feelings for Nora one way or the other. She was cold and distant by nature. And although she held a position in the special department team, people rarely saw her in the building. Unlike the rest of them, she was allowed to come and go as she pleased. However, because everyone in the department trusted Morris with their life, especially after the Johnson incident, they were all able to conclude that what Morris had claimed must be the truth. Reinforcing this belief was the fact that Morris held an extremely high position in the organization. So if he was willing to be Nora's guarantor, then they should all stand down and side with him in the matter of the interrogation of Nora Smith. It should not take place. Ruth knew that that was what everyone was thinking, and even though she was filled with envy and hatred, she understood that her opportunity to conduct her interrogation the way she wanted had passed. She remained silent, biding her time. Without Johnson as her protective shield, she must work above board, following protocol to the letter in order for her to be able to stand her ground and prove Nora's association with the mysterious organization. Brushing off the SWAT team, Ruth conceded. Since Captain Ford has unwaveringly stayed at his position, Miss Smith should no longer be detained. However, since her mother is a huge factor in the case, Nora has an extreme conflict of interest. Therefore, it stands to reason that Miss Smith will be excluded from this ongoing investigation. We don't want to have any accusations of tampering of evidence should she remain involved. Turning to the device in front of Nora, Ruth asked, "Captain Ford, don't you agree that Miss Smith should be barred from participating any further in future interrogations related to the case?" Ruth had made it clear to all parties concerned that while they may have derailed her progress, they were not about to stop her forward movement with the investigation. Before Morris could speak, Nora replied, "Sure, I'll agree to that." She glanced around the room, accepting the fact that she probably would never fit into this team environment. She was a lonesome dove coming and going by herself. During her entire tenure with the organization, she had never made any connections, Brenda being the exception. All she had ever experienced here was pressure and limitations. She was thrilled to finally be able to leave the special department. That is, after she finished what she had set out to do. However, Nora added, Let me interrogate the suspects before I go. Once I confirm that they are telling the truth and have not been coerced into their confessions, I will gladly leave. She wanted to confirm that her mother was indeed definitely with the mysterious organization. Doing her own interrogation would afford her the opportunity to find out what the truth actually was. And she could do so without having to keep a low profile, bide her time, and avoid standing out. She would be able to go undetected. This was important because if she attracted the mysterious organization's attention, she would be putting not only herself, but her family in danger. One thing that Nora didn't understand was that if her mother had been the true leader of the mysterious organization, then why hadn't Yvette gone abroad and met up with the mysterious organization once she fled from New York all those years ago? Given how the mysterious organization was able to move Truman from place to place without the authorities detecting it, wouldn't it also be possible for them to move her mother into hiding somewhere as well? But apparently, that is not what was done. Not only had they refused to help her that way, but Yvette had returned to California, where she spent the rest of her life. And oddly, she even married that scoundrel Henry Smith, and entrusted him with her well-being and that of her daughters. None of this quite added up. Cutting into her thoughts was Ruth's sarcastic tone. "Miss Smith, I have already talked about this. Didn't I just say that if you don't trust me, then you don't trust Black Cat? It's impossible for the interrogation proposal that I designed with Black Cat to have flaws." Nora released her pent-up anger. Ruth had just crossed the line. She was extremely disgusted by how the woman was using her own alias to brag in front of everyone. This prompted Nora into luring the unsuspecting mouse into the game. "How well do you really know Black Cat?" Ruth flashed those adorable dimples and waved her hand to impress the group. "Oh, Nora, please. Of course Black Cat and I are very good friends. Our colleagues have already seen us when we were discussing the proposal together the last time." So you claim to know Black Cat really well?" Nora waited for the silly woman to step into her trap. "Of course I do." Ruth glanced around the room as if she was holding forth in her own private court. "That's all well and good," Nora retorted dispassionately. "But can you prove that Black Cat knows you?" Ruth was livid. How dare Nora imply that Black Cat didn't know her? Ruth's eyes squinted as she whipped her head around to glare at Nora. She clenched her fists nervously and retorted, "What? I don't understand what you're saying." "You don't? Then I'll explain it to you carefully." Short-tempered from her lack of sleep and her sense of hunger because she only had a bowl of oatmeal about 4 hours ago, Nora was ready to take Ruth on. She pulled a chair next to her over and straddled it with the back of the chair facing her opposition. She propped her arms on the back of the chair. "I am sure you are aware that Carl has been acquitted." Nora brought this up because, even though Black Cat was the #1 assassin in Carl's assassin alliance, however, most outsiders were completely unaware that Carl had never actually met Black Cat before. Everyone began to understand that it was possible that Nora had actually met the Black Cat in person. An audible gasp in unison rippled through the room. When she heard it, Ruth wanted to draw empathy from her audience to get them back on her side. She dabbed at the wound on her forehead, which was barely bleeding. Holding a spotted tissue against the wound, her eyes darted back and forth, avoiding contact with Nora's piercing eyes. "Of course I know that, but what does that have to do with anything?" Nora grinned. "And everyone says you're so smart, but somehow you can't understand something as simple as this. What's that called? Selective reasoning? Let me put it more directly so that you can comprehend." As if she was talking to a 3-year-old, she emphasized each word. "Black Cat does not know who you are. So that means that Black Cat did not help you with your interrogation plan. Do you want to tell all of us who did?" Ruth coughed and searched around for a glass of water. She knew that the Black Cat she had spoken to was an imposter, but she didn't want anyone else to know that. She attempted to cover her indiscretion with another lie, but Nora prevented her from speaking when she casually said, "Is it possible that your Black Cat impersonator betrayed you as well?" Ruth was speechless. During her past exchanges with Nora, she had never been impressed with the young woman's clever capabilities. She had taken her silence as a sign of ignorance and assumed that the woman did not know how to speak in public. Ruth was shocked to find out that Nora knew precisely how to put someone in their place, and she wasn't afraid of doing it in front of others. Ruth regretted the fact that she had learned about this quality the hard way, since she was the object of Nora's barbs. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out but a little squeak. Nora couldn't be bothered with this pest any longer. She spoke into her cell phone to Morris, stating, "I'm going to interrogate those few suspects." "Works for me," he agreed. And everyone knew that since the Johnson incident, because of Morris's brilliant contributions to the success of that case, the word acting had been removed from his job title, which meant that he had been given the authority to make decisions for all matters pertaining to the special department. Once he had given his stamp of approval, all of Ruth's minions were now no longer under her control. They all stared as she walked to the office door, heading toward the interrogation room. She held up her cell phone so that Morris could assign a few people to work with her on the case. Stan was not among them. Stunned at the turn of events, Ruth stood frozen where she was and didn't move. Stan and the others who had been excluded from the interrogation stared at Ruth. As usual, he spoke for the rest of them, since he was the one who had installed the interrogation light in Brenda's office, as per Ruth's instruction. And even though he had advised her against it, she refused to listen and commanded him to move forward with the technique. With a hint of disgust in his voice, he accused her, saying, "So it is evident to all of us that you don't know Black Cat at all. You are so full of lies. Have you ever spoken the truth?" Ruth bit her lip and clenched her fists tightly. Under her breath, she mumbled to Damon, who was standing next to her, "Regardless of whether I know Black Cat or not, the interrogation process I implemented yielded invaluable information. That can't be denied, and that is what I should be acknowledged for doing." She observed that everyone was studying her with a different countenance. Stan shook his head. "Not only have you been deceived by a fake Q, but the same device was used to trick you again. Your true capabilities, or lack thereof, are finally coming to light." Ruth knew she was at the end of the line. She couldn't carry on the act anymore. With nothing else to lose, she threw in the towel, admitting, "Fine, it's true. I don't know Q or Black Cat. I made up all of it. But that doesn't mean that I am incapable of doing my job. My abilities are real. They do exist, and I have proven it with the recent confessions. There is absolutely no problem with my interrogation process." With that, she haughtily threw her head back and followed in the direction that Nora took when she went out the door. The others also followed her. Once she caught up to her, Ruth quipped, "You just don't give up, do you? You don't seriously believe all of this has nothing to do with your mother, and that she isn't the mysterious organization's leader, or at the very least, the second in command? Go ahead, interrogate them yourself. I dare you. I can't wait to hear what you get out of them." Angrily, but with confidence, she added, "I'll bet it's something good, even if it isn't true." She knew that her interrogation methods were viable and capable of getting reliable results. Everyone knew that the bodyguards had all been trained by the mysterious organization, and therefore it wouldn't be easy to reveal the mysterious organization's location. They knew how to avoid detection and lie, and would do everything in their power to keep the whereabouts of the headquarters a secret. Arrogantly, but with determination, Nora insisted on being given the opportunity to interrogate them, even though she knew that it was a last-ditch effort to find out more about her mother. Ruth assumed that whatever Nora was about to do was probably nothing more than a few techniques she had learned from Black Cat when they had met. Everyone knew that in order for a technique to work, it would be best if the actual creator of the process was present to implement the procedure in the proper fashion. It was clear to the group that Black Cat's capabilities weren't something that would be learned with just a few conversations. It took training, long and intense. It couldn't be captured in a book, read, learned, and then performed. No, it needed direct training and experimentation, a trial and error period. That's why everyone held Black Cat in such high esteem. The style and process was unique and so difficult to learn, and had been perfected by Black Cat. Knowing this helped Ruth exude confidence, because she knew that most likely nothing would come of Nora's interrogation sessions. But Nora knew that she was capable of Black Cat's process. But before she entered the interrogation room, her cell phone vibrated with a reply from Truman. And this time, it appeared as if Truman had not dodged her persistent question, "Who plotted my pregnancy?" Truman's answer, however, made her stomach clench. Relentless, she wanted answers, but she would have to seek them later, as she had more pressing business at the moment. She held up her cell phone, instructing her team to wait outside. "I'm going in alone." Sensing their hesitation to follow her command, they heard Morris, who was still connected on his video call, bellow out, "Follow her instruction. That's an order." Upon hearing the stern quality in his tone, they stood at attention and waited outside the door as Nora entered the interrogation room and shut the door. The moment the door closed, all the sounds from the outside world were cut off, which meant the conversation inside the interrogation room would be isolated. Ruth paced nervously back and forth in front of the closed door. She knew that if Nora's results were different, and she were able to elicit contrary answers to Ruth's process, then, in all likelihood, Ruth would be dismissed from her position in the special department. Just relax, Ruth thought to herself. There's no way that Nora, in this short amount of time, would be able to solicit anything out of the suspects. She felt relieved. Of course Nora wouldn't be successful. But still, Ruth's concern made her pace in the hallway like a caged animal. On the opposite side of the door, Nora casually sat across the table from one of the bodyguards. She sensed he was the leader of the group. Shackled down with iron chains on his feet and hands, he glared at her from the opposite side. Nora decided the direct approach would work best. "I'm going to cut to the chase. You claim that my mother was involved with the mysterious organization. Is that correct?" The bodyguard nodded his head in acknowledgement, but refused to speak. Nora pressed, "Is that the truth?" The bodyguard leered and finally spoke. "Probably difficult for you to believe, but yes, our sole purpose in coming to the US is to take over where she has left off. You, being her child, are automatically a part of the mysterious organization." Not wanting to address this issue at the moment, Nora continued, "You never officially answered my initial question. Was my mother officially involved in your organization?" "Yes, she was," the bodyguard answered firmly. Nora confirmed and then got up and took her phone to the corner of the room. "Morris, I'll take it from here." Even on the tiny screen, Nora could see the pity in his eyes. "Good luck, Nora. We'll chat soon." Nora nodded her head. "Thanks again. I owe you." He smiled and said, "You do." She disconnected the video call with Morris. After putting away her cell phone, she flexed her wrists as she returned to her place at the table. "Since you claim that's the truth, I want to inform you that the interrogation is going to officially begin now." Confused, the bodyguard repeated what Nora had said.
"The interrogation officially begins."
Slowly nodding her head, Nora replied, "That's right." Her casual demeanor concealed her impatience and determination. But when she twisted her wrist and stretched out her hand, her true intentions were revealed. Remarkably, even with the top-of-the-line soundproofing installed in the interrogation room, the sound of the bodyguard's cry pierced through the walls. The technology was not able to obliterate his pain. The stoic soldiers outside of the room shuddered to think how loud the scream from pain must actually have been, and wondered what had caused the issue. When the second groan was heard, the men shuffled on their feet, but Ruth had the opposite response. She stopped dead in her tracks. She stared at Stan, who finally knocked on the door and called out,
"Miss Smith? Nora Smith, are you okay? Please give us a signal that you are okay."
But there was no response. Nothing but silence. And then the cries of pain began again. He turned to Ruth to ask,
"Is it possible that the suspect broke free and is assaulting Miss Smith right now?"
The other 3 team members looked away. That was not a woman's voice coming through the door. Ruth stood with her hands on her hips and disdain on her face. Here she had thought that Black Cat had imparted a skill or two to Nora. But apparently, all that she learned were barbaric torture techniques and nothing more. And, as Ruth was anxious to point out, the actions that Nora was taking against the suspect was basically against the law. Nora must have resorted to this technique when she resigned from the special department. In despair, Ruth sat down on a cushioned bench in the hallway. She couldn't believe that Nora had resorted to such techniques, but she would make certain that one thing happened for sure. She would file a report about what Nora was doing, because she knew every report about physical abuse would be taken seriously. Putting her head in her hands, Ruth clutched her hair with each cry that could be heard through the walls. They seemed to continue forever. As part of her philosophy, she had deep concerns about the viability of such a technique, utilizing physical torment to solicit confessions. And everyone knew that the bodyguards from the mysterious organization were specifically trained to resist any form of torture. It would be next to impossible to get a confession of any meaning. If it had been possible, the special department would have resorted to such techniques several days before in order to solve this case sooner rather than later. Ruth knew that it would be nearly impossible to break down those well-trained members of the mysterious organization. After enduring several minutes of the shouts, abruptly the room went silent. The longer the stillness extended, the more uncomfortable everyone became. The quiet was even more unsettling than the disturbing sounds. After the agonizing moments of silence, the door to the interrogation room burst open, and Nora calmly strode out of the room. Normally stoic, people perceived displeasure on Nora's countenance, which added to the uneasiness for all parties concerned, with the exception of Ruth, of course. She was thrilled that Nora looked bothered. It confirmed to her that Nora had most likely failed. To confirm her perspective, she claimed, "You didn't get anything out of him, did you?" The corner of Nora's mouth rose, but remained silent. Ruth took it as an invitation to continue. "Or perhaps you did get some responses, but they were the same answers that I did, yes?" Nora's silence was causing Ruth continued uneasiness. She concluded, "Well, either way, if you tortured him, then the information is just not reliable. We've proven that is the case. A person tortured will always give you false evidence. They will do and say anything to stop the pain." Nora glared at her. "Ruth, as usual, you have no idea what you are talking about. Unless this is your technique to continue spreading rumors about me, I'd like to make it clear to everyone here that I did not torture him." Ruth scoffed. "I find you a bit defensive, which is usually because of a guilty conscience. I think you are the one promoting rumors. We all heard him. Every one of us here. That man's voice nearly burst our eardrums out here." She waved her arms around the room, making the men feel uncomfortable. "We all heard it." She was hoping for some support, but she didn't receive it, so she forged on. "You can't deny it. I'm going to see for myself, and I'll bring back proof." Ruth marched straight into the interrogation room, with two of her now tentative minions, Damon and Mark, following close behind her. At this point, both of these men wondered which of these two women to believe, but they were leaning toward Nora being the one who would come out as the winner. It appeared as if, with her integrity and determination, and her connection with Morris, that she would be the one to come out on top. When the trio entered the interrogation room, they found the bodyguard breathing heavily, drenched in sweat. But surprisingly, he showed no signs of external injuries. Ruth couldn't believe it. In fact, she refused to accept that his external appearance was the truth. She examined him closely. Utilizing her watch, she reached down to pick up the bodyguard's manacled wrist so that she could check his pulse. His heart rate was normal. If anything, it was slightly lower than normal because of his exquisite physical condition. She asked him to stand up so that she could observe his movement. Other than being manacled, he showed no sign of being wounded or injured. It truly appeared that there was nothing physically wrong with him. Perplexed, she eyed him suspiciously. How could this be? What had Nora done to this man? They had all heard the cries through the soundproofed doors. In Ruth's expert opinion, there was no way that Nora could have gotten the information out of him in such a short period, and with such agonizing responses from the suspect. Completely frustrated by Nora's refusal to work with others, Ruth wanted answers, which she knew deep down that she would probably never get. She couldn't understand why the woman had to be so mysterious about everything she did. Nora was never willing to share any of her techniques, and always worked solo, completely in private with no one watching, no cameras or recordings. In other words, she never allowed documentation of her procedure. No one knew what she was doing except perhaps Black Cat and maybe Morris. No one in the building, including Ruth, would be able to figure out what she had done just now. But Ruth knew that it would be a bad career move to allow Nora the opportunity of interviewing any of the other suspects. She furrowed her brows. Dimples would not be effective at the moment, and she barked at Damon. I have my doubts as to whether Nora was even capable of getting anything out of our suspect. She made sure to use the plural to make sure that her team members felt like they were a part of the effort. We all clearly heard some disturbing sounds emanating from this soundproofed room. We can only imagine what techniques had been implemented to solicit such sounds. We could hear the man out in the hallway with the door closed and locked, rendering us incapable of preventing her breaking the law with her methodology. We have to do everything in our power to prevent her from interrogating any of the other suspects. Damon, who was becoming apathetic because of the swinging pendulum of commands the day had brought, he had no further interest in listening to Ruth any longer. He remained silent and stared straight ahead, giving Ruth the impression that he was ignoring her. This attitude had the opposite impact of shutting her up. Instead, it lit her up, prompting Ruth to continue her tirade. Her face went red and she was trembling with anger. But before she could speak, Nora's low voice carried through. Our suspect, Nora knew how to use the plural tense as well, confessed everything. If you don't believe me, go right ahead and re-interrogate him yourself. This time you will get an honest, truthful, and direct statement from him. Nora positioned herself between their shoulders so that she could make eye contact with the bodyguard still sitting in the interrogation room. The simple glance from his interrogator made the bodyguard shudder all over. The big burly man whose aggressive and relentless tendencies simply disappeared after his interview with Nora. Now he was a quivering, snivelling simpleton, his chains rattling as a result of his fearful tremble. Stunned, Ruth asked, "What did she do to you?"
"What did she do to me?"
He repeated her question with a trembling voice, as if he was incapable of his own thoughts. The memory of what had taken place just now behind the closed door terrified the bodyguard. He closed his eyes tight against the memory, swallowed hard, and then blurted out,
"I'll confess. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't let her interrogate me anymore. She's a hellcat. Don't leave me alone with her again."
Half an hour later, a dispirited Ruth walked out of the interrogation room, with the others with downtrodden looks upon their faces. Mark studied Ruth, stating,
"I will send the new information from the interrogation to Captain Ford right away, and he can decide how to deal with you."
He stepped aside to report to Morris, while the others warily observed Ruth. He returned within a few minutes. He took in her presence and relished the next moment.
"I have been told to relay to you that Captain Ford does not feel that you are a contributing member in the Special Department, and therefore, we are to escort you out of the building."
Ruth thought about deceiving them, but she knew her academic qualifications were real. Her claims of knowing Q and Black Cat were all made verbally, so there was no way her claims could be contradicted. Her accountability was secure. In the same way that lay people claimed to know a celebrity, could they be arrested for falsehoods? Unless they attempted to monetize their deception and thereby breaking the law, they could not be arrested. So Ruth reasoned neither could she. If someone pointed out that she had made a mistake, it would be considered negligence at most. Her academic qualifications were such that they should help carry her through. The interrogation plans she had devised, even if they were under false pretenses, were all rigorously reviewed and supported by science. She could not help it if the information she received from her interrogation contradicted the results that Nora had achieved. Ruth knew that how she responded to the announcement would have a huge impact on life as she knew it. She could feel the stares from her former team members. As much as she wanted to remain calm, cool, and collected like Nora, instead she clenched her fists and exploded. "You can't do this to me. Captain Ford? Who does he think he is? He has no idea what he's doing. My interrogation methods are effective, and the statements made by the suspects are not wrong. Nora's mother was definitely involved with the mysterious organization as either the leader or the second-in-command. I have no doubt about that." Seeing that she was still stubborn and unrelenting, Mark claimed, "But she has betrayed the mysterious organization. You were unable to get any of them to tell you this crucial fact. So that means that the statement you were able to extract from the suspects was only a half-truth. The new information makes it completely irrelevant and the opposite of the truth." Yvette had, in fact, been the second-in-command in the mysterious organization and served as the key figure in the gene serum's research and development. But when she later betrayed the mysterious organization, she was forced to flee and come back to the United States. After being arrested in this country, she escaped from prison to avoid pursuit from the mysterious organization. She would have been a sitting duck while she was incarcerated. She finally ended up in that secluded little town in California. Fortunately, when she escaped, Yvette knew that she had better have some protection, so she stole a key element of the gene serum, the mysterious organization's most important and lucrative project. And the elements that she had in her possession stymied the process, handcuffing the research and development team, rendering all the gene serums they had developed incomplete and therefore ineffectual. The crucial missing element caused the serum to result in one of two possibilities, either insanity or death.
So the mysterious organization wanted this key element returned as soon as possible. But why had Yvette betrayed the mysterious organization? The bodyguards were not privy to that information. They had only been informed of their purpose in coming to the United States. They were to acquire from Yvette's successor everything that had belonged to the mysterious organization before her departure. As a result of Ruth's interrogation report, Nora had become enemy number 1 of the special department. But once Nora's interrogation results came in, it was clear that Nora was not their enemy, but that she was squarely in the same camp with the rest of the team. Talk about a contradiction of conclusions. As for whether it was Ruth's lack of ability that led to her failure to uncover the crucial information, or a deliberate act on her part, Morris couldn't be bothered to pursue. It would be a waste of the special department's limited resources. The important thing was that she vacated the premises and never came back. Once Nora had interviewed all of the other bodyguards and she discovered that all of their answers were the same, she returned to the original interrogation room. She braced herself to finally deal with the text message from Truman. She picked up her cell phone and looked at Truman's reply to her text message. "Your pregnancy was beyond all of our expectations. We did an investigation and were able to confirm that your mother set everything into motion. She made a deal with Caleb, but then she deceived him, and the rest of us as well. The original agreement between Caleb and her went like this. Once you came of age, she would give back to the organization what she had stolen away from us. You would marry into the Gray family, which would set your future. But for some unknown reason, she reneged on the agreement. Your mother was never one to be trusted." Nora stared at the text message in disbelief. Remembering back to her childhood, her mother fled to California behind Ian's back. That must have been when she had created the audio recording in California, which she left for Nora. In addition, her mother made it her business to make various arrangements to secure Nora's future. When she finally came to New York, she was able to learn from other people what her mother had truly been like. This helped Nora form the image of what she thought her mother must have been like. It had gradually begun to take a clear shape in her mind. And even though she had never felt her mother's embrace, she knew from the bottom of her heart that her mother was a strong, independent, powerful, and determined woman. Apparently, she had been able to catch the eye of young and talented men like Ian. And while she might have been intimidated, she was definitely respected by all. She had developed the carefree pill from an idea, and it had become sought after by all once she was able to improve the formula. She was recognized for her prowess in alternative medicine. Even John, although he never liked her personally, had to admit that he considered her as a talented person whenever he spoke of her. People of her generation always referred to her as a legend of their times. She was a ray of sunshine, vibrant but unrelenting. So why would such a person choose to be a member of the mysterious organization? And why would she invent a method like artificial insemination and utilize the technique to impregnate her own daughter? Upon reflection, Nora drew in a sharp breath when Caleb's words echoed in her mind. The final truth will definitely be cruel. Nora clenched her fists as she clenched her jaw. Whatever her reason for betraying the mysterious organization, Nora knew that her mother had made the right decision. And even for the special department, the fact that Yvette Anderson was not an enemy was a cause for celebration. But for Nora, it didn't make any sense to her that her own mother would plot against her like that. Why would she do it? Nora had always resented that her own life was out of her own control. Becoming pregnant had certainly derailed her expectations. However, she was grateful that Justin was the father of her children. But what if she had never met up with him again? Or, even though she had met him, she didn't fall in love with him? Would her twins have been destined to live without a complete set of parents? The answer most likely would have been yes. She couldn't believe that it would be possible, But she came to realize that her feelings towards Yvette just became even more complicated. Morris came flying into the office, interrupting Nora's thought stream. Apparently, he had just gotten off the helicopter. The moment he entered the special department building, he searched for Nora. When he saw her, he exclaimed, "You can't leave." Nora didn't respond. She was uninhibited by nature, and a lifestyle that required constant adherence to rules and regulations for every little thing did not suit her at all. Besides, she was up way past her bedtime, and she needed her sleep. It was essential for her well-being. Plus, she couldn't figure out, since they had arrived at the truth, why her presence would be required. She remained silent in protest, which required Morris to explain himself. "Never mind. It's only because certain people in the department disappointed you." His gaze swept towards Mark and the others nearby. He, along with the other team members, lowered their heads. Cooperating with Ruth when she insisted on interrogating Nora filled them all with guilt. Nora shook her head. "I don't blame them. Ruth was manipulating them to help her. She never regarded Mark and the others as friends, more like her pawns to her queen in the game of chess." Seeing how indifferent she was to returning to the organization, Morris reflected for a moment and then offered, "Before you leave, I'd like to suggest that you pay Caleb Gray one last visit. There is information that he is the only one capable of sharing with you." Surprised, Nora responded, "Caleb?" Morris simply nodded his head. She shrugged her shoulders, then turned and walked in the direction of Caleb's interrogation room. Once she had cleared the hallway, Morris turned, and with a sharp look in his eyes, Morris stared at the people who had cooperated with Ruth. He pointed at them and said, "Do you guys understand what you have done wrong?" They all hesitated, not wanting to provoke his anger. Finally, Stan braved it again. "Captain Ford, we were following procedure as we were being directed by Ruth. None of us feel that we have done anything wrong, but we can apologize to Miss Smith if you think that will help." Morris shook his head. "You've heard the phrase, 'too little, too late.'" He knew that once she had made up her mind, Nora would never turn back. He also knew that everything that took place in the special department during this period of time had fallen far below her expectations. The team grumbled. Stan pointed out, "I think she's being unforgiving then, even arrogant. We have been trained to follow protocol, that subordinates are to follow the orders of our superiors. It is not our place to question our leaders. That's our training from day one. Wouldn't you agree?" Before he could finish his sentence, Morris's gaze cut him off. Then he spoke. "Have you forgotten that she's a forensic doctor? Perhaps her attitude is scientific, not arrogance. Have you ever thought about that?" Stan and the others grumbled as they looked away. When Morris heard the attitude emanating from the group, he continued, "A forensic doctor. That isn't the only thing she is capable of. The way I see it, you all have no idea what you have missed out on." Disgruntled, Stan replied, "What else could it be?" On the opposite side, Damon, who had watched Nora walk off, sensed that there was something mysterious and unfathomable about her. He could see it in her aura. Suddenly a thought popped into his head and he asked, "She's not cute, is she?" Morris's face was unreadable, and even though he didn't say anything, he did not deny it either. Damon's eyes gradually widened. He thought of some of the things they had done to Nora after she joined the special department, and he held his head in regret. If she really is Q, then, my God, what have I done to her?" Mark, who was standing next to him, was taken aback by his response. Even though Q was an inspiration to people in the IT world, it didn't really mean much in this department. He quipped, "What's the big deal about people like Q and XYZ? At the bottom of it all, they're all just hackers. For our department, it's Black Cat who is the impressive one." We're in the clear, unless, of course, she's the black cat. He chuckled at his own joke until Stan elbowed him in the ribs. In a low voice, Stan reminded him, after she interrogated the bodyguard just now, he called her a hellcat and begged not to be left alone with her ever again. Even though he directed it toward Mark, everyone in the room heard it and fell silent. Mark, stunned, simply said, Surely not. How could it be?